Hi, everybody. This is Bob,
This is Archie.
and we're going to talk about not being perfect, which is unusual for us. We're going to talk about mistakes that we've made or things that we could have done better. However, I take the positive approach, and I think that all of those things were learning experiences.
It's very difficult for Bob and I to talk about mistakes because we don't think of our mistakes as mistakes. We think of them as learning opportunities. So
Exactly.
it's very difficult for us to talk about that. So it'll be interesting to see how we end up
Yeah.
telling these stories.
Yeah, we had to think of what kind of stories we have. I think we have one story where you made a mistake, and that's it. I can't think of any for me right now.
Well, see, when I make a mistake, it's a big one. I'll tell you that. So that's okay. So one of the things about Bob and I is that we're our natural risk takers. We're not people who support the status quo in general. So we're always running around with our neck completely exposed. And so what happens is you end up being sort of a center of attention. And so when you do something that is not necessarily okay, so you're already taking a chance by going in a different direction. And if it doesn't go perfectly, then everybody's going to be giving you crap, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right. So, but at the same time, for us, it's like, okay, yeah, I did this and it didn't work, but so now I know what not to do, and I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to do it differently. Okay. So that's been our career, really.
Oh, in that case, I got lots of stories.
There you go.
But it's also making mistakes isn't just about having an idea without understanding all its ramifications and consequences. And
Oh yeah.
it's also, dealing with personal issues and emotional issues. And sometimes you can go and make mistakes that way too. So it wouldn't be just technical mistakes, but personnel mistakes.
Well, I can tell the one story. Now I know for me it was more just I can tend to be moody, and when I was a manager, it seemed like just sometimes there's a lot of pressure. You got all kinds of things going on. I mean, although I loved it, there were some days where I was not in the best of moods, and
We all have those.
yeah, and I had a fairly large group, and I had some people that I was lucky in that I was in a really bad mood one day, and one of my better writers, he was a good guy. He's just a low-key, easygoing guy. But he came in and asked me a question. I was in a lousy mood, and I think I chopped his head off. I think I bit his head off, that kind of thing. And I remember him leaving, and I'm feeling really bad about it. And I
As you should. I know the guy.
Yeah, exactly. And so I apologized to him, and the next time I had a mood like that, I sent a memo out to the team. It's like, okay, I got to get out of here. If you need to get to me, send me an email. And that person whose head I chewed off, he sent me a memo saying, yes, thank you. Thank you for leaving. Because he remembers. It's like, yeah, don't mess with me when I'm in this mood. So anyway.
We all have them. It was a turbulent time in my life, and I was never in the best of moods during that time. And unfortunately, I bit someone's head off pretty badly, and it turned out to lose a friend. There was this, I was working as a contractor, and this person who had worked with me in a previous company had okayed me to come in as a contractor. And so he was very anxious to have me help out the way I helped out with the last company. Well, he had we'll call her the second in command, this younger woman, and she had a problem with one of the engineers. And unfortunately, she started, I won't say bad-mouthing, but putting him down a bit. And it was okay the first time, but I was aggravated. And then she did it 2-3 more times, and then I let her have it. And my response was overreactive, and it really wasn't about her at all. It was what I was going through. And I felt bad afterwards, but I haven't really talked to that guy again. And it's unfortunate, but those things do happen.
Yeah.
And you just got to live up to that, and you need to understand, like in your case, you had the chance to apologize. So that would be the right reaction. I didn't get that chance. So there are those types of mistakes. Then there are the other types of mistakes where you come up with a great idea and you think it's wonderful, and maybe you're just off the mark. Because one of the things about being a risk taker and coming up with these ideas is you need to collaborate with your ideas. You need to get other input. Sometimes you come up with an idea and some people put it down and you charge ahead, and I've done that. I was working on this. I had a directive to streamline an installation, which is something we talked about in our last podcast. And so I came up with this wonderful idea to put up this card and passed it by human factors. and they didn't always select the right audience, to review these things. It should have been someone who would be in the field,
Uh,
and they didn't. And so this one person, I had panels on the card, and it was numbered. There was a category. Category 1 had steps 1 through 3. Category 2 had steps 1 through 7. Category 3 had steps 1 through 8. Well, this person went and tried to install this product using step 1 of each category. So step 1 of category 1, then went over to step 2 of category 2. And, well, there were people who were very not so much risk takers. And this was a completely new format at the time. Nobody else was doing it. And I think that they were shooken up that the test so-called failed. And I was actually pulled out on the carpet saying, it's no good. It failed. We're not doing this. And this was a manager, my supervisor's boss. And I just looked him in the eye and I said, it's not a failure. It's a learning experience. I had no idea that was going to work. The format works, but now we're just going to do consecutive numbers. So regardless of the category, it's 1 through 25. The categories remain, but the steps changed. This number. So we avoided that problem. In the end, customer support loved it. It fit the directive that they gave me, and it worked out in the field. But the reaction to that didn't stop me.
right.
But I was also adaptable. So I could say, okay, here's the problems that we ran into. Was that a mistake? No, it was not a mistake. It was a learning experience. I learned from that and I moved on.
Well, I mean, to some extent, sometimes when you make mistakes, it depends on the environment you make it in. And I'll use an example that you were involved in. So I had a writer who, good person, good writer, but she needed to be a little bit more confident in the way she approached things. And so my idea was to pair her with Bob here and, get her to sort of learn by osmosis some of Bob's style and the ability to take a risk and deal with it. Okay.
Yeah, I've been a mentor. We've both been mentors many times. And so you kind of put that one on me.
Yeah. And the mistake was what I decided to do was to not let this person know that she was being mentored by Bob. I said, don't tell her that that's what you're doing, that kind of thing. And that was really bad because she figured it out after a while and she confronted me. What the hell's going on? And I'm like, oh, yeah, I wanted you to learn a little bit from Bob, blah, 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 but I didn't, And so that became and again, I fortunately was working in an environment where it became a joke. Like my boss and my boss's boss would come in. Yeah, that was really stupid. and it was, but so I know not to do that again in the future. So, and again, I learned from it,
You're pretty sly about that. And,
Yeah.
and this person already had a problem, a little bit of jealousy problem, if I remember right.
Yeah.
And so you trying to sneak in me mentoring them, that backfired
And
spectacularly.
I think that's why I did that, because I knew she was a little bit intimidated by you or whatever. So that's why I didn't want you to. If I threw you at her as a mentor, she may have rejected.
Yeah, she would have reacted.
Yeah. So,
But still, that would have been her decision.
right. So yeah. So that was But again, I was in an environment where I was a new manager. I mean, I think I was only in management for a year at that point or less.
Yeah, your first time as manager.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, okay, yeah, you made a mistake. It was stupid. I won't do that again. And I haven't. So there you go.
I think the first time I became a kind of a group leader. Now, I had switched from being a technician, engineering path, to being a writer. Now, I think I discussed this in the introductory episode, but now all of a sudden, I'm a writer in the midst of writers who were more English majors. I was the only one that had practical hands-on experience with the product. I'd worked on it. I'd troubleshot it. I fixed problems. So I was pretty familiar with it, and I was able to talk with the engineers exactly with in their style, their language.
Right.
So they understood me, and they didn't want to talk to the other writers, which was a problem, but that was not of my making. So all of a sudden, without any real warning, my manager decided that I would be a group leader of this group of these things. And all of a sudden, all these people expected me to know exactly what to do next. I'm still naive as a writer, and I felt this pressure. One of the things I learned from that was that as a leader, I don't need to know everything. I need to be collaborative. I need to join people together, which has been my style since then. But back then I felt I needed to know everything. And so I didn't talk as much. I felt the pressure and I made some mistakes going forward. Saying, yeah, we got to do that. and off we go and doing that. Well, that's not working out too well. Oh my God. Fortunately, we all got laid off before all that, it got too bad. But so I was saved that way. But I took that as a learning experience and say, well, okay. So in later years, as I became group leader, I was a manager for a little bit, and I understood the role better. The manager is a part of the team, and that the team itself is what needs to be successful, not any one person in it.
Although they made a joke out of it when I think one of our presidents, I think it was Bush, said something about I'm the decider. To some extent that's true. I remember I had two editors in my team, and the two editors were very different people. One was like ex-military, straight as an arrow kind of thing, and the other guy was kind of like a hippie. But they're both good editors, right? And so they were arguing over some really trivial thing, and okay, so they come to me to settle the sake.
Just remember the background. When these editors start fighting over some trivial little thing, it is World War III.
I know it's a big deal to them.
It's one word or the other. Oh
right.
My God!
Yeah, it was a big deal to them. So basically the way I made the decision is, I listen, not really. I mean, one of them would tell me what their side was, and the other one would tell me what their side was, and I'm kind of only half listening. And basically, I just pointed to my lead editor. It's like, yeah, do it that way, because I don't really care what the decision make, because they were both right, kind of. But I'm going to support my lead editor. That's all. That wasn't really a learning thing. I did that by instinct, but that's the right thing to do. It's kind of like, okay, this is my lead editor. Do what she says. That's it. So, and again, it set the tone so that if they have arguments in the future, the lead editor, they don't have to come to me anymore. Whatever the lead editor said goes. That's it.
So that's an example of an off-the-cuff mistake that turned out to be the right thing to do in the long run.
So I mean, and actually, okay, I have to tell the biggest mistake I ever made was, and I think I told some of this story in one of the previous podcasts, where I had a dysfunctional team, and I decided to try to get a big project going that would hopefully bring the team together. So it was one of these things where it was sort of the bleeding edge of the XML, CCMS, content management system era. I mean, right now that's ubiquitous. Everybody's doing it. But back then, there were only a few of us who were doing it. And so I was trying to introduce it into this company as that major project. And I needed to it was the kind of thing where I worked with my boss, and he said, okay, so first what you need to do is lay the groundwork, do some presentations on XML and CCMS to the company at large. So
okay.
I had
now these are tools that we were using to create documentation.
Right. Content, I forget what the first C means, but content management system is the last three. Yeah. So I started to lay the groundwork about all of that and teach. And it was really funny because some of the engineers, when I did these lunchtime talks, would come to me like, it's kind of, they felt a little weird having a new technology like XML being introduced to the company by the pubs manager. Okay. So that was, so
you're not in development. You're not an engineer. What the heck are you talking about?
Exactly. But what that was, again, my boss, pretty smart guy. He says, lay the groundwork, get people excited about this, and then I'll get you an audience with the executive committee, because I needed money. I estimated it would cost about $400,000 to get this thing done.
Petty cash.
Yeah. So I went in front of the executive committee and gave them an impassioned presentation about the future of documentation and content management and all this other stuff. And they gave
okay. Yeah. For nobody who's seen Archie give an impassioned presentation, it is wonderful to see. I mean, I wish we can get a video of that.
Yes, I know. I get the arms going.
The arms are going. The big smile. It's crazy. Okay, please continue.
So, end of that, they gave me $350,000. They said, "Oh, you find the last 50." And I did.
Darn them.
Yeah, and I did. I mean, and when they said that to me, I kind of smiled, because in the back of my mind, I said, "I know exactly where I'm going to get that money." And that's a story for another time. But anyway, so I get this money.
It's not illegal, so don't worry about that, folks.
So I get my $400,000 together, and I go back to my team. It's like, okay, you guys said you wanted to do this. You guys, all said, because I sent out email before I even started the process. Said, would you be interested in going this way? Is this a project you'd be interested in? And everybody said, oh, yeah, sure. Come back with the money. I said, okay, I've got the money. Let's go. And it's like, I got this deer in the headlights look from the writers.
He actually got the money.
He actually got the money. And so and talk about learning experience. Before I even started that project, I had signed up to give a presentation at the Canadian Tech Pubs convention in Canada.
Yes, this is from people working across the industry from all sorts of various companies, and they get together for a conference, a writers' conference, essentially.
Right. So I was going to present this whole project to that audience, and when I couldn't get it done because my team basically couldn't deal with it. What I did was I just changed the presentation and presented it as a failure. I actually stood in front of an audience and went through all of that and said, ultimately the mistake I made was that I worked on upper management. I worked on my management. I didn't spend enough time laying the groundwork, if you will, with the team of writers who would have to implement it. And that was the mistake. So when I got the money and they weren't ready for it, they couldn't deal with it. So that was my mistake. So I learned now that you can't just throw something like that, something that big. To me, it was not that big, but to them, it was big. You can't throw something like that at a team without a lot of prep. So
yes, one of the things about mistakes I find is that it's usually a lack of communication in some form or another.
Yep.
You didn't communicate with the right people, or you didn't get the right information, and I find that to be other than emotional problems, which is different.
And I will say that part of it was that did I say this already? That okay, so when I went to that company, I was making a good living, and they couldn't beat the salary that I had at the company I had before, so they matched it. And I said to them, okay, that's fine, but I don't want to have to wait a year to get a raise. I want my salary and my performance reviewed after 6 months.
Yes.
So
that was no mistake.
So getting all this stuff going and all that stuff, I was like, okay. So after 6 months, not only did I get a raise, I got stock options and all this other stuff. So that was all part and parcel of it. So I'd only been there 6 months, and I'm doing all this stuff and trying to get my team going. And so it's just a little bit too much. They didn't know me, and people who know me know that if I say I'm going to do something, it gets done. By hook or by crook, it gets done. And so I think when I went and asked them, so why are you guys having such a hard time with it? You said you said you wanted to do this. I said, we didn't think you'd get the funding. So there you go.
So they misled you in a way.
Exactly.
But you didn't spend enough time with them to figure that all out,
right?
Because you had teams before that if you were going to go do something, you knew they were behind you.
Right.
This team wasn't.
That's right. And then it was all part and parcel of the dysfunction, because it was just, like I said, that was the one job I quit in my career. I just left. It's just like, wait, I can't do anything with this.
Now, would you say quitting was a mistake, or the correction to a problem?
Well, like I said, this was just one of many things, and it all came down to I had a dysfunctional team. I had my vice president. The vice president of my division was a fool, because he told me, okay, so when I was interviewed, they told me, okay, this is a dysfunctional team and we're trying to fix it. We know they have problems. So I had a playbook in my head, because again, I had turned around a group. I know how to do that. I knew how to do that. I had success turning around a failing group. So I came into this thinking, okay, I know what to do here. But then I was like, oh, you can't fire anybody. So that means that I couldn't change the dynamics, because it's really all about dynamics. You got to get the right people, got to get a good mix of people that can work together. And so if I couldn't get rid of anybody, and I think I told part of this story as part of something else.
Toxic environment.
Yeah. We had some performance problems, so I tried to address the performance problem. As soon as I said one conversation with one of the writers, she goes out on disability, right? So it's kind of like, okay. And then this guy says, you can't fire anybody. And then they took the rec away from me. Not like I could replace that person who went out on disability with another person, not even a contractor. So now I had reduced staff. And it was just a bad situation. And just before I left there, the VP, who was, like I said, his restriction on the firing, I think had something to do with had a different. I think the reason they fired him is because he had a problem with people like me and didn't want me to have that kind of power. So So I think
that was a tough management problem.
Yeah.
That management hierarchy was a
so
big issue.
So they fired that guy just as I was walking out the door. They fired that guy. So the quitting was probably a mistake because if I knew they were going to fire him, of course they couldn't tell me that they were firing him. But if I knew that guy would be gone,
You could have,
I would have stayed there, and I probably would have been able to work everything out. So
okay.
yeah.
I'm again thinking about mistakes and stuff like that. Again, communication was a problem. One of the companies I was working at, I was doing all the writing, but the user interface was really off. And I told the story previously. We hired this one contractor who did this beautiful interface that didn't work with the product at all. So I'd taken the reins to do that, but I did it somewhat independently within the company. And so without communicating as well as I should have, some of the executives started thinking that I was trying to take over the company. I found this out much later on. I had no idea they had that impression. And I was starting to get all sorts of cold shoulders. Even when the team was successful, the CEO came in and congratulated the other two members of my team, but not me. He purposely had his back to me. So the mistake that I did, and I kind of corrected it later on, was that somebody actually came up to me and says, "Oh, you're just trying to take over this whole thing." And I said, "No, we're failing in this particular area. I'm trying to bolster it so the company is successful." And he just looked at me, and he would work with me again later on in another company. And once he realized what I was doing, it was fine. Again, it was a lack of communication, maybe a little touch of arrogance. Yeah, I know what I'm doing. And
Well,
I do
there's
charge ahead.
always that.
With me, I'm stunned that you would say that.
Well, I will say that the reason we're doing this mistakes thing is because I think it's important for people to realize that we are human. We're not gods. We do make mistakes. We do make mistakes. We learn from them and we move on, but we do make mistakes. So
See, that's Archie's comment on this.
yes,
Not necessarily mine.
I know. Bob is perfect. Bob has never made any mistakes ever in his life.
That's right. They're all learning experiences. I just changed the name. Now, there's lots of things I think we all go through.
They say that the only way you learn is by making mistakes. What's the saying? If you never made a mistake, you haven't
done anything.
They haven't done anything. That's right.
And that's why that's part and parcel of being risk takers, which is what we do. We're willing to take a chance. We take a leap of faith, and we don't always land where we think we're going to land. But when we get to that point, we reassess the situation, and then we move forward.
And actually, in a future podcast, we're going to talk about transitions. But since I mentioned that I quit this company, one of the things when I went to that company, I had been at a startup that had basically closed its doors, and it took me 2 weeks to get another job at a higher level and higher pay. Right? Well, actually, the same pay, but I got a raise in 6 months. So unfortunately, I'm conditioned to think that layoffs, closures, but I can get another job, no problem. I learned that when I quit that job, it took me a while to find another one. Let's put it that way. So that was a mistake.
Mistake being impatient.
Yes.
Not that you're impatient at all.
Well, I just wanted to get out of there. It's like I don't know. I remember I got chest pains at one point.
Yeah.
It turns out,
toxic environment.
Yeah, it was just too much. When you feel when you feel helpless, and I'm a manager and I felt helpless, that's not an environment I want to stay in. Yeah. So
it was not a mistake to leave.
Yeah. It's just the way I left was a mistake.
So yeah, again, let's see, what other mistakes have we made? Well, I mean, there's 3 or 4, not bad for 30, 40 years.
Like I said, I mean, and I think in every case, you bounce back stronger most of the time, and I think that's been true. I mean, after that, because I think that was the last position I had before I started specializing in medical devices. So I went from that company when I finally did find a job. It was in a medical field, and I've specialized in medical devices since then. So that was a good change because medical devices is
in the end, yes.
In the end. So so it was a mistake, but it's to leave that way. But I ended up in a better place in the long run.
Another mistake I made was, I guess it's part and parcel with communication, but it's also understanding your environment. I worked for this hotel software, which is a bit different. These people thought very differently than any other engineering team or executive team I'd ever worked with. And I didn't understand that. And I didn't take the time. I was doing multiple contracts at the time, and life was very hectic for me. So I came in to do this contract job and do it quick. And so one of the vice presidents had come up to me and said, well, we're running out of time, and don't worry about having everything technically accurate and complete, which threw me off. It's just like, well, wait a minute here.
You can't do that.
I don't do that. And he goes, no, our customers are more concerned about the color of the online help screen than they are about the information in it. And I just walked away like, okay, you're crazy. Okay, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
Turns out, not only did he believe it, but the CEO believed it. The whole executive staff went for that. And by brushing him off, it gave me a bad reputation. And then also in that same team, they said, how come you're not writing about this new feature? I go, well, I've talked with the engineering team. You've got this really deadline of a schedule, and I'm not so sure they're going to make it, so I'm hedging my bet. I go, I'm writing around it. If it comes in, we're good. If it doesn't, I've got all this stuff here. So, the customers will be okay. And the CEO, it's a very small company. The CEO just looked at the vice president of engineering. Is it going to be in there? Yeah, it's going to be in there. And again, I looked like the bad guy for not doing that. It was a fascinating environment. I would say the mistake I made was, well, not being in shock and not believing any of this, but not understanding where they were coming from and what they wanted. I was always so focused on what the customer needed. And got to the point where I sometimes felt I knew what the customer needed better than the executive team.
But did you tell them that? Did you have data to say that the customer wanted something else?
No, I didn't have the data.
Okay.
Because it was a short-term contract.
Yeah.
So, I was, when the contract ended, they were very happy to get rid of me. In fact, I was being yelled at.
Wow. Okay.
But as a side note, I did give them the color they wanted. And it still didn't make it better.
I'd be curious whether the customers really appreciated that color and it made all the difference. I mean, it's one of those things,
I had no idea, and I was never going to go back to find out. Oh, another part of that story was again, not understanding where these people come from. The VP of Finance apparently had more political clout than I realized. And so we had an argument about trademarks. And I said, I'm always on the err on the side of caution.
Right.
And I said, well, we need to protect our trademarks. Well, Microsoft doesn't. I go, well, Microsoft can handle that.
Where's your lawyer? Where's your lawyer? Yeah.
And I said, look, let's call this, it's with a trademark name, you never use it as a noun.
Right.
It's a legal thing. You use it as an adjective. Okay. And so Kleenex is a famous story where they lost a trademark or had some problems because they used it's not Kleenex tissues. It was always Kleenex.
Right.
Instead of facial tissues. So that was a problem. And there were
I think Xerox was the other one that lost.
Xerox lost something because everything was Xeroxed instead of a Xerox copy.
Right.
So those are examples. Yeah. And so whenever I go into a small company, I go, do you have this trademarked? And it's a legal thing. We want to protect that trademark. Here's how we use it. The VP of Finance, who had nothing to do with the product, said, no, we don't do that. We're going to use it as now. That's that. And I'm just like, you're the VP of Finance. Why should I listen to you? It's just like, I'm going to help with the company. And boy, did I get in trouble for that too, because he went to the CEO and complained. And
did they have a lawyer, a lawyer on staff?
Not that I know of.
Okay. Because I've been in that situation before, arguing about trademarks, and it's like I send a memo to the legal department. I said, okay, how should we do this?
I had an argument with a lawyer about this at one of the other small companies too. He didn't believe me. But again, it's understanding the environment and what. The people, well, contractor is a little bit different than an employee, and so I had to be a little more sensitive to that. And that was a job. It's one of the few jobs that I left on bad terms.
I will tell you a story, just kind of a little bit off topic, but it was the kind of thing where a contractor, one of my first contracts, I think it was during that transition period when I had left, when I quit that company, and I took a lot of odd jobs here and there, and so I had this really short contract, and so there were two of us on this contract, and both of us, between the two of us, we had about 50 years of experience. And what we're being asked to do,
Two old guys.
yeah, and what we were being asked to do was take Word files and convert them to this other format, something that a kid out of high school could do, right? So I was doing it, and the other guy was there before me, so I came in after he had been there a little while, and he's looking at the documentation. He said, "Oh, this is really this stuff is not really good. I'm going to suggest that they change this and blah blah blah." And I said, "Oh, okay. Let me know how that comes out." And this was on a Thursday. He said that he was going to go talk to the management about what he saw in the documentation. So I come in on Monday. He's gone. Okay. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, so I'm just going to shut up and do my job and leave. So, yeah. So in that case, I didn't make the mistake. Somebody else made the mistake, and I got to observe it.
I'm not so sure that was a mistake. It just sounded like it's a bad company. It was a good thing. I mean, this was. I didn't get the job because I argued with the guy. They brought me in. They said, okay, we got this product. We need some good documentation. I had a good reputation. I go, yeah, I could do that. They go, oh, we need an installation guy. We need a user guy. We need a manager guy. And he's explaining all the guides that he needed. And I said, is that necessarily true? I go, I don't understand the product yet. Why don't we figure out what the documentation needs is before we stovepipe? We make these manuals that may or may not be necessary. And he was just, no, we got to have a manager guide. We got to have a user guide. And I go,